Welcome to Shooting Straight. I'm your host, Ken Buck. In today's highly partisan environment, political adversaries often minimize each other's arguments by labeling motives rather than engaging in constructive dialogue. For the next 30 minutes or so, I invite you to join me as we learn about Congressman Burgess Owens and how he went from professional football to public service. Many of us know Burgess for his football career, where he played for the Raiders when they won the Super Bowl in 1980. We will learn how Burgess's parents influenced him growing up and how he continues to apply the lessons they taught him in his work as a member of Congress. It is my pleasure to welcome Burgess Owens to the show. Are you ready to start shooting straight?
Ready, Ken. Looking forward to it, my friend. Really looking forward to this conversation for sure.
Good. I am too. So let me ask you, education has meant so much to you in your life. Why?
It's interesting. I grew up in the Deep South in the 60s, days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. But there was a gateway to succeed. And my race at that time thought it was education. Actually, it was four things. It was faith, family, education, and free market. And we were very competitive because of it. My dad was a college professor for 40 years. My mom was a high school teacher. So I grew up in an environment in which academia was everything. They made sure that during the week we didn't look at TV. We had a little room where we did our homework and our studying. And I go back to something that was said by one of our founders, and that is ignorant and free can never be. We have to be a society of educated people thinking outside the box, being able to articulate ourselves. And I'll tell you, Ken, what I believe is the more we are critical thinkers, the more confident we are in the way we think, the better we can communicate with each other.
So when you're growing up with a college professor and a teacher, I understand now why education is so important. What memories do you have of their lessons for you and sort of discipline? I don't know if you ever brought home a B. I was happy with a B, but my parents weren't necessarily happy with a B. But how did they talk to you about education?
We kind of came through the same, raised by the same generation. C was not acceptable.
It wasn't average in our household.
No, it wasn't. But something that kind of gives you an idea of how focused they were on training us to educate and be disciplined. Because obviously, when you're growing up, you can have a lot more fun things you want to do. But in our household, and I don't know if you remember, Sunday nights we had Disney World. The Magic Kingdom. You had little Tinkerbell sprinkling her little thing over the castle. That was the last show we saw. I think it was 8 o'clock at night. The last show went off, and we wouldn't see TV until Friday, Wild Wild West. So the entire week, we were expected to study, to show what our grades were. There was a commitment. There was a connection with the teachers and the parents in those days. I grew up in a time, if you got in trouble in school, just knew you were going to be in trouble when you got home. And there's nothing you can say. More trouble. And there's nothing you can say that's going to dissuade them from thinking that you were wrong. So it was a great environment. And I'll just say this, because having a dad who believed in education, and I'll do a real quick history. When my dad came back from World War II from the Philippines, he could not get his postgraduate degree in Texas because of the Jim Crow laws. And I didn't realize this until years after. When he passed away, I ran across this box of letters, of rejection letters, of all these letters that he had put into colleges across the country. And he didn't get there because of the color at that time. There was segregation going on at that time. But that generation also looked at that as motivation. And what he did, continue to try until he and his brother got accepted to Ohio State. So my dad got his PhD in agronomy in Ohio State. His older brother got his PhD in economics in Ohio State. Had another brother who had gotten his degree, and he was an engineer. And part-time, he flew an airplane, taking mail back from Wichita Falls to Chicago. This is in the 60s. So my point is, this generation that raised me came from the generation before that had no education. My grandfather was a third-grade dropout, but they believed in every generation should be better equipped, more opportunity than the next, and we have to make sure we hold on to that. That's one of our greatest opportunities and responsibilities as a generation, to make sure our kids do so much better than we ever thought about.
It's fascinating because one of my guests before was Ben Carson, and he talked about his mom requiring them to read 2 books a week, but also no TV. They had like 2 hours of TV for the week. And one of the neighbors was going to turn his mom into social services for child abuse.
Yeah.
And yet it seems like that's almost a pathway to success.
It's no question. And my message has been based on the knowledge I now have of my remarkable race in the community I was raised in, is that, and this is my message to any American that truly wants to make it in this country, that if you tie ourselves into the tenets that make our country great, those tenets are faith, family, the free market, and education. If we focus on those kind of things, then, and we realize that anybody can succeed. And my community was a good example of that. We really bought into those tenets. And because of that, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we were the most competitive race in our country. And this is things that a lot of people don't know because we're not being taught nowadays. But my community, because they believed in faith, family, education, free market, led our country in the growth of the middle class. Men matriculated from college. Men committed to marriage over 70% in percentage of entrepreneurs. In the community I grew up in Tallahassee and across our country, segregated days of 60s, there were 40% of entrepreneurs equated to 50 to 60% of middle-class Black Americans. So the middle class was something we could aspire to. We expected. We didn't think that anybody was going to stop us, because what was also great about our country during those days that our parents was raising us, it didn't matter what culture it was. It didn't matter, we were not assimilating as we have done today. We all believed in patriotism. We loved our country. Number one, it was the greatest place in the history of mankind to be raised in. And we also believed in meritocracy, so that it didn't matter what somebody thought, what somebody called us, what expectations were. If we felt we could win and we worked hard enough to win, then that's how we commanded respect. And let's have to get back to that.
I want to ask you that because it's really a fascinating issue that you just raised. On the one hand, your dad was a victim. And I don't want to use that word in a pejorative sense, but your dad was discriminated against by the school systems in Texas and other places. He felt discrimination, and yet, and you saw segregation, you saw discrimination, and yet you felt that this was the best country in the history of the world. How did those two things work together?
Well, it comes down to this. You can either learn from our history, learn from, be driven by the faith that we have, and also be influenced by those people who truly believe in our own potential. And I had all the above. We were taught our history. I knew that our dear Christian values, I just understood that because of the values we built our country on, that every generation gets better than the previous. It's just the way we go. And there's nothing that can stop us. So I think the blessings that we all give each other, the greatest things that as Americans we give to each other, I think are 9 words. If I can do it, you can do it. We learn our history. We realize that particularly during those years that we were just talking about, every culture was going through the same issue. The Germans, the Italians, the Polish, we were not assimilating. I don't know if you remember the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Okay, for those who don't, those much younger, it was a game changer. It was I think in the 60s, it was Sidney Poitier, dating a white girl, and really not dating. They just showed up to dinner. They didn't touch each other. They didn't kiss. But it was a game changer because it was showing the progression of the thought that blacks and whites can get past the color thing. Now my family, I have 6 kids, and their spouses go from black, white, American Indian, Hispanic, Trinidadian, because that's who we are. We are a country that drifts toward looking at each other the way God does. That's who we are. And unless we're fighting against an ideology that teaches us different, we'll always become a better society. And that's what we have to get back to. We cannot go in the direction that right now is taking us back to the 1960s. I grew up when we looked at each other from outside in. And had the fights and the disagreements based on our color. We've gotten so far past that in today's society that we should never allow ourselves to go back in that direction. So I was just blessed to be raised in a community that very simply I was taught this: if you want to win, you work harder, you run harder, you study harder, you command respect by showing the other guy you're much better than they are. in so many ways.
That's a great segue to my next part of your life that I know about, and that is sports. If you want to win, these are the things you need to be competitive. You were a great athlete. What did you learn from your parents that helped you excel in athletics?
It's interesting because I talked to other athletes. We talked about this before, about those things you do in high school and your training in college, and you find you separate yourself based on where you spend your time and where you spend your energy. And anybody who's succeeded in anything, you find you will separate yourself from others who just don't want to pay that same price. Whether it be going to the gym and you're the only one there, where your friends are out to the beach or whatever it might be. And I remember those days. But I think with me, it was even more so than that. I was so proud of the community I grew up in and the time I was raised. Our goal was to succeed so we can reflect good on our community and our family name. So I made some decisions earlier. I think the thing that drove me probably most was fear of failure. I did not want to fail. And if I had to work a little bit extra harder or stay I lived in the library, for instance. My degree was biology. And that was a combination of a couple things. My desire to want to do that, but also when I left high school to go to college, I heard from this white guy that he didn't think I could do it. In those days, blacks were not supposed to be very smart. And when I heard that, I made a decision that it was going to happen. So I lived in the library at University of Miami. If I wasn't on the football field, I was in the library because I was going to prove that guy wrong. Now, I never saw him again. He probably has no idea, but it was that drive that comes from within to prove yourself as an underdog that really, I think, helps us as Americans. And if I could say this again, I think the greatest gift of being an American and who we are, we always kind of look at ourselves as underdogs. In the past, we have. And if you look at yourself that way, you want to prove yourself, prove the person wrong, it is the greatest way to be motivated to continue to work hard when others just won't do it.
So you were successful, obviously, in high school playing football. Recruited by Miami, other schools?
Well, that's a good segue. I had a good junior year. My senior year was a disaster. So my senior year, I was not recruited by anybody. And I grew up in Tallahassee. There was Florida State and there was Florida A&M, where my dad was a professor. None of those schools recruited me. The reason I got down to Miami is that I wanted to get into marine biology. I realized earlier I didn't want to go any further north. It was too cold. And so Miami was a good place to be. So I went to my coach. I had a really good game my junior year in high school. So I went to my coach and asked him if he would send some film down to Miami. He decided to send this film of my junior year. They didn't know any difference. And so he sent it down to Miami, and they asked me to come down and take a look at their campus, and I signed that contract before they could figure anything else out. So it was actually, my goal was really not to become, quote, a NFL football player. It really was just to get my degree. And in those days, in the late 60s, getting a degree was everything. So I figured if I can go down there and just make the team, get my degree, and move on, I'll be in good shape. And of course, I was able to find a talent, and thank goodness, take it on to a different level.
So you're in Tallahassee growing up. You graduate from high school, you go to Miami. How many black football players were there at Miami at the time?
I was the third black to get a scholarship at the University of Miami. And again, it was one of the greatest. I look back on this journey of how I got to where I am. It was one of the greatest things that happened for a couple of reasons. Not only did I get a chance to find out that I had some talents that can take me in a different direction, but it was a very turbulent time during those years. And I had no white friends. I mean, everything was color. And we fought a lot. When I left university.
Were you mad?
I was getting to a point where I was beginning to judge people based on their skin color. I was getting a little bit angry with white people, and to that point, I remember having a conversation with my mother. I was standing and she must have picked up on something, because we were standing in the kitchen, and she said, "Bergie, just remember this: don't let somebody else's problem become yours." Remarkable wisdom that has taken me all the way to the day.
So how does that apply in the life that you were having at that time?
She was telling me, in essence, don't let a racist turn you into one. And that's the way we should think about life. We should always take that advice. Don't let somebody's issues, let them keep their own issues. Don't let them become yours. If we do that, then we can truly define who we are, our attitudes, our success, because based on how we treat other people, no matter not how they treat us, but how we treat other people, we will find a gateway to success because people just start pulling for us at a point. So it was a good process, but going to Miami was even more so impactful, as I realized later on, because again, I was the third Black to go to school there. I ended up finding a friend. I found a friend within the first 6 months. Jeff was not a football player. He did not like doing homework like I did. So he didn't go to the library like I did. He was a Jew. He was Jewish, and I'm a Christian. There was really nothing in common other than the fact we found something that just allowed us to enjoy each other's company. And I remember one day looking at Jeff and forgetting he was a white guy. And that's when I recognized that we're capable of overcoming this entire issue of divisiveness if we look at each other from inside out versus outside in. It also showed me that what brings us together is what we have in common. And I tell you, as a country, the reason why we've progressed to what we have, we've had things in common for decades that we cannot lose touch with. Our faith in God, no matter how we worship Him, our love of country, no matter how we got here and how long we've been here, we love this country because of the opportunities and freedom it gives us. And things like sports. Just think about it. I'm a Raider. I'm trying to think. Was it Bronco or
Bronco?
Okay, there we go. So what happens though? You get in that stadium. Politics goes away. In the past, politics goes away. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. You see the guys with the same uniforms or the same colors, and you're buddies. You shoot for the same goals. We cannot allow anything to divide us with those things that bring us together. And I tell you, patriotism for our country. I would say this. I was taught very simply, in my little community, you love God, country, family, respect women and authority. And you keep it that simple, life gets really fun. Through the ups and downs in life, through the obstacles we have to face, we kind of know where it's going to end. In the end, we win. And so you can stay hopeful in that process.
Did sports play a role in that? I can remember my dad telling me about, he grew up in rural Colorado. And the first time he really had any interaction with a Black person was the military.
Yeah.
He goes to fight in World War II, and all of a sudden there's this camaraderie that overcomes all of the stereotypes. You know, this a Black man from L.A. and a white kid from rural Colorado are now in the same foxhole together. They don't care at all about their color. I'm imagining that you're one of 3 Black football players on the University of Miami football team, and you're playing with these other white players. And you know, you tell me, but my guess is, who cares about color? We got the same goal of beating this other team.
You know, when you think about the areas where discrimination, segregation, all that was broken down, it was in military and sports, because you hit it on the head. When in those two environments, there's only one thing that matters, and it's winning. Period. You work hard, you sacrifice, and all you want to do is you look at the scoreboard or you look at coming back home, you want to know you came back home safe or that you won that game. And if that becomes the issue, anybody who adds to that goal becomes a friend, becomes somebody to respect. Even if you don't spend a lot of time together, you have a respect because he's bringing value to you. And that's what we have to continue to remember as Americans. We need to start looking at meritocracy as the end game. Because if somebody brings value to you and you can bring value to others, then everything else does not really matter.
Certainly a lesson you learn in sports, meritocracy.
Absolutely.
And you're at the University of Miami. You're not even recruited to play football, but you become an All-American at the University of Miami.
And it's because I was fortunate enough to have somebody see something in me that I didn't see in myself. And we all experience that. We all do. And we have to look back on life and recognize the real blessings of good people around us is that we do see limitations ourselves. We kind of get very comfortable in this little zone that we're in. Sometimes to get outside that comfort zone, somebody else has to kind of pluck you out. I, thank goodness, had a coach. I was a running back coming out of high school. I loved being a running back, never saw myself doing anything, but I had a coach that said, I want to try you out a defensive back. And actually, when he decided to move me there, I was so depressed. I mean, I was depressed for weeks, because I was doing something that I was not familiar with. It ended up being the very best position that I could have ever been in, because I was able to move forward and do very well in that. So I would say to that transition that I went through, be willing to get outside your comfort zone, number one. Be willing to embrace the fact that somebody else sees something more in you than you might see in yourself. And take it to the bigger scope, there's a God in heaven who sees our potential. He's going to give us opportunities, and those opportunities comes through sometimes tough times, because it's through that contrast of tough times we really see what we're made of. And we learn some of the greatest lessons. We talk about sports. The great thing about sports is you work so hard, you get defeated, you go through pain, all that stuff that really hurts, but you come out on the other end so much better through the process, and who you are and your attitude and your positivity. All that stuff happens because of those tough times you go through in the foxhole with your teammates.
So you are now you've played your last football season at University of Miami. You have a draft coming up with the NFL. Did you have any expectations about where you were going to be in the draft?
It was so unlike where we are today. We didn't in those days. In order to really get noticed, you go to you have all-star games, and that's actually how we did it. University of Miami was not what we see today. We lost most of the time. I think we might have 3 or 4 games a season we might have won, but because we're independent, we had other great teams like Alabama and Texas and Notre Dame. They'll come through and win their games against us and go back home, but scouts had a chance to see who we are. So I really didn't have any idea where I was going to land. I know I was being recruited by sports agents. That was all I really knew. And I found out that I was the first-round draft choice. I was the 13th pick in the first round by walking past the sports facility. And I went in and I said, "Burgess, you just drafted." Unlike today.
No
So
kidding.
it gives you an idea of things have changed a lot over the years, over the decades. Wow. But I was drafted 13th. Chuck Foreman, for those who remember those days, Chuck was drafted number 12, first round.
With the Vikings.
With the Vikings,
Yeah.
exactly. So and by the way, the money in those days was totally different. In those days, you played during the season and you worked during the off season.
I know a lot of folks sold insurance and did other things.
Exactly.
So did you graduate before you were drafted? What happened with your education?
What happened is, again, because of that community I grew up in, the degree was everything. It was, first of all, showing my community and my family that I was going to see it through. So I still had 2 semesters. So what I did in the contract is we put in the contract that they would take care of the rest of my education, pay for that. So I took care of that, and when I got that little degree, I tell you, I was so excited. It was just to get it done.
What was your parents' reaction?
They were proud. They were proud of it also. But here's the thing: they weren't surprised, and that's important. This was the expectations, and I think you have to understand, if we expect great things from our kids, from those around us, we're not surprised when they get there. We just say thank you and congratulations. We're proud of you, because they expect it anyway. And I look back on my family's my upbringing. I just had such a remarkable mom and dad. It was 5 of us growing up. They believed in education. They believed in exposure. We took the last summer we had together as a family before me starting my football. I was 16 years old. They decided, this was in mid-60s, to take 5 kids in a little in a station wagon with a pop-up tent, and we pulled from Tallahassee to California to up through Canada and back to North and South Dakota. And it took an entire summer. We saw every national park you never think of. I had a chance to see America for the first time, be exposed to white Americans for the first time. It was a remarkable experience. But those are the kind of things that generation wanted for the kids. It was not unexpected for Black families to do those kind of things. So my message is this, and because right now, because of lack of education, because of the way that our history has been changed, we've been told that we just were not a good country, that we did not get along, that we have an oppressed race, Black race, and an oppressor race, white race. It is so far from the truth, because all Americans proceeded and progressed together. The things we did together were remarkable. All you have to do is look at Black Wall Street in 1915. All you look at my community that I just talked about. At 5 years old, in the mid-50s, I lived in Liberia, Africa, because my dad was doing a research project there. A segregated community. But my point is, success is available for everyone in those days, and his success is available for everyone today. If you just follow those tenets and just be of value to somebody else and have a great attitude. If you're angry, people are going to want to get away from you. Just don't be an angry person. Be a very positive and someone you feel blessed and good things happen.
So you play professional football. You're fortunate enough to play for the Raiders and win a Super Bowl. And at some point it ends.
Yeah.
And I've talked to good friends who have played professional football for years, and they didn't even look at a football game for a while after that. It was just, they knew it was time to hang it up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they wanted to look forward. They didn't want to look back. What was it like going from professional football to business?
That's a good question. First of all, the transition I made was one in which I felt a calling. Growing up in that community I just talked about, seeing how my parents focused on their kids and that the children, my friends all grew up thinking success was inevitable. In the 1980s, I realized it was changing. And I had this desire to start a business, to be successful, and in some kind of way impact these young people coming through so they would have the same experience I did. So my last year was one of my better years. I was all pro, going into a free agency season, and I decided to let it go because I had this business I was going to run. And one thing about being young, having a lot of money, and being a little liberal, cocky liberal, you kind of think things are going to happen just by working hard and putting a lot of money at it. What you need to have in a business is also a good idea. And I realized 9 years later that I needed a better idea because everything I put into that business, I lost it all. So 9 years later, literally had to start all over again. I went from this beautiful home in Long Island, New York with an in-ground pool and nice cars in the driveway to literally with 4 kids living in a basement apartment in Brooklyn, New York for a few months. But I was taught something by my parents, my dad, that it just carried me through. First of all, I was taught that a man will do anything that's honest and hard to make sure his family is surviving. So for a few months, I was a chimney sweep during the day and a security guard at night. Thank goodness we didn't have social media. so I was able to do this without the world knowing it because it was a very humbling time. But I learned something so important during that period. I remember standing in the basement, a basement apartment, looking out on the street there, trying to figure out how in the world this happened. I mean, seriously, you go from a football player, successful, to a chimney sweep. And I remember this thought came through my head that this is temporary. It's for your good. And it gave me that understanding that I could make it through this. And a few months later, just making a trip to D.C. at the right time, I ran across a friend who at the time was working with a company called WordPerfect. And they had a position as opening that was closing that following Monday. And I took the position. That was the beginning of my career, 25-year career as a corporate sales rep, which allowed me to come out of that process. But this is what I've been able to do through that messaging, that little period. When I talk to young people today and I tell my story of success, the first thing that comes is, well, yeah, you're lucky. You played football. Of course you can talk about success. So, well, yeah, I played football, very fortunate, but I'm talking to you right now as a former chimney sweep, as a security guard. And if I can do it, you can do it. This is America, and this is a place of second chances. All you have to do is get back up again. Don't blame anybody else. Look back at what you did wrong and say, okay, I'm not going to do that again because I don't want to be here again. And you move forward. But the thing that we have a chance to go through, and the reason why we have these obstacles is so we can help others. I obviously, there's a lot of lessons we learn through failure and success. But the biggest gift we can give is to Americans who need hope is say, you know what, I know exactly what you're going through, and if I can do it, you can do it. So that's what comes out of it. Something else I did want to talk about, I mentioned what my mom had said, that at a very important stage. There's something my dad did that there's 2 phases. One was an action, and the other one was principle. Back when I was growing up, like 12 years old, in the days of segregation, you actually had service stations that were segregated. So you had white women only, white men only, and in the back you had a very filthy restroom designated as colored. But my parents never did the colored thing. They were really proud people. They were very bold, And so my mom would go into the white restroom, and my dad would go into the white men's restroom. So we had this trip from Tallahassee to Texas, and would I now look back on it, Dad would always start the trip off late at night, and he would drive throughout the night. So by the time we woke up as kids, we were pretty much close to home. So the restroom issue was not a big one for us at that time. But I remember stopping at a place, and my mom had gone to the white women's restroom, and these two white boys came along, tried to break down the door to get her out of there. And I watched my dad get up, and he went and took care of it. He was a fighter. He did not let anybody demean our family. And so he took care of it. So I saw that. I saw what men do, even against the great odds, what men do to protect womanhood. But the greatest lesson came a little bit later on, because they never brought it up again. They were not the kind of people who say, look what these people did to us, and it never came up. I just happened to be walking past their bedroom when we got back home, and Dad was saying he was going to cut up this card for the service station chain that he just experienced. And he was going to send it back to him. And about 50 years later, Dad and I this was just before he passed, we were just talking about old memories. And I said, Dad, remember that one incident? I think I was like 10 or 12 years old. I said, yeah, I remember that. And he says, Burgie, and I never bought another drop of gas from that service station. So that's a principle 50 years later, that now the gas chain didn't miss not one red cent of his money. They had no idea who was doing it. But for him, it was a matter of principle and pride. Right. And for him to pass that down to me was a true blessing, because I feel the same way. I will not look at NFL games today. I don't drink Coke anymore. If I can get away from American Airlines, I will do so. It's a principle. I mean, it might be a little more inconvenient, but those are the things, I think, Ken, that makes our country so unique. In our DNA, we have that desire to want to do the right things and sacrifice if we have to show that we're not going to buy into this. So of all the things we can do right now as Americans is to get back to that. We have to be a people of principle, and we realize there's folks who there's an ideology who wants to steal our freedoms, who wants to steal our country from us, wants to steal our kids from us. So moms and dads, it's now time to stand up, man up, woman up. It's time for us to do things that we might not in the past had the time to do. But we really are fighting for the heart and soul of our nation now.
So we've talked a little bit about your childhood and about sports, and then your life in the business world. And the last thing I want to visit with you about is your decision to run for Congress. But I want to ask you, why aren't you a Democrat?
Okay. That's a good question. I've always been a conservative. My family's always been conservative. But we believed that the Democratic Party served our needs. And it's just that's not true. And I think during that process, when I came out of NFL and started a business, recognized our country's about second chances, recognizing that it's a country in which literally I had support from every background you can possibly think of. There's no color, there's no religion, no faith that I didn't have a friendship with that helped support, encourage, and give me opportunities to move forward. And so, thank goodness we had a President Reagan, who was not only bold about who he was, but he was able to articulate it. He made it fun to listen to what conservative values were all about. And the more I listened, and I'll say this too, I was very, very blessed to be around good people who gave me space. And that's what if I can give a message, we're not going to agree on everything, but let's respectfully agree to disagree. I was fortunate to be with people who were able to have these conversation debates about conservatism and my thoughts, and they never pushed it. I didn't feel put down. I didn't feel anger. So I had a chance to grow in a way that I began to accept certain tenets and realize, you know what, the Republican Party has represented my values so much more than what the Democratic Party has done. It's a party of freedom, of choice of schools, of pro-life for babies who need protection, of looking at each other from inside out versus outside in. And I saw those values of business ownership, particularly small business ownership, to have a chance to own and grow and pass down their legacy. Those are things that I've always believed in. My dad and I would talk about it all the time, about going to business together and one day passing his legacy down. So it was kind of an easy thing to have the right person at the right time there doing it. And then once I made the decision, just as I was a very, very passionate Democrat, I became a very, very passionate conservative. And that's where I am today. I don't apologize for the values I hold today. I don't apologize for our country. I love the fact I feel blessed that all the things that has happened to me, good and bad, is because I live in a country that gives us second chances and gives us an opportunity to dream and hope and move past our obstacles.
When I visited with Ben Carson, I was talking about some of the horrific names that he had been called by liberals. And I used a few of the terms, and then he said, "Ken, they've called me a white supremacist." and I was kind of stunned by that. But I sat in a Judiciary Committee, and you and I are on the Judiciary Committee together, and there are some members on the Democrat side who are much more upset with you talking about conservative values than me talking about conservative values, because it breaks their narrative of what you're supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's a blessing. And I'll say this to all those who are listening, and of course what we're doing right now. We have been blessed to be living in this country at this time. We have a very special segment of our country's history that we're here living. We have a chance to serve, you and I. But you have people who are listening right now that have a chance to go out and be engaged. They can vote. They can speak up. We are here for a reason, and we're here to save this great experiment that started off 200 plus years ago by our Heavenly Father, who wanted us to be the beacon of freedom. So I think everything we're doing right now is for a reason. It's not an accident. I think that we're now seeing a lot more conservative voices, more than I ever have seen. I mean, I'm so proud to see how we've transitioned from the time when I just became a conservative, and there was just Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams. That's basically the voices. And a Rush Limbaugh. Rush was able to kind of cross the line some kind of way. I don't know how he pulled it off, but he pulled it off. But other than that, we're now seeing, you cross the line. I mean, you see Candace, you see Larry Elders, you see Ben. And what's happening is the old days of calling us names to demean us, it doesn't work anymore. We can care less what people call us because we love our country. We love the fact we have an opportunity to serve in a way, and our way to serve is just by telling the truth and taking slings and arrows. It's okay. I think what's happening is that through the last 4 years of policies, what we've seen is that it truly is policies that makes a difference. When you have all of a sudden you wake up and we realize we have the lowest unemployment in the history of our country for blacks, Hispanics, Asian, women, veterans. You have 400% increase in black business ownership. And Ken, I can't say enough about that. When you have that percentage of black people saying, you know what, I have faith in myself, I have faith in my dreams. I believe there's a God in heaven who's going to help me go through these obstacles. I want to commit to my community so they can become a better place. I want my kids to have a legacy. When you have that kind of buy-in, that kind of ownership, it changes everything. It particularly changes the community. So coming out of that, what it says very simply is that we can do so much more, and we now have an opportunity to leave a party that has failed us. What bothers me more than anything else is to see misery put on people on purpose. We go to Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, and misery is running rampant. People don't have a choice in their schools. They can't protect themselves. Their representatives are getting rich while they're getting poorer and more dependent and more angry. Defund police. Are you serious? Now, you can't put that into any kind of common sense. Who wants to fund the police if you live in a community that needs protection? Only people can say those kind of things are folks who live in a dream world in which they're protected and they'll never ever have to deal with the consequences. It's called lack of empathy. So what I love about where we are today is we're having conversations today that we really would not have had maybe 3 or 4 years ago or 10 years ago, because we've come out of this little dream bubble. Americans live in this dream bubble. We get up every single day. We go to work, we build our businesses, we have these memories we're building, and just know it's going to continue to happen. We wake up in 2020 and realize, you know what? We can't put our kids in school, can't go to church, can't open our businesses. We're having conversations today, Ken, that we never would have had before. And it's very healthy because now we know what we're up against, and it's going to give us a chance to move forward.
So, Burgess, I think you answered my question of why you ran for Congress. Are you glad you ran for Congress?
I am. It's to go back to what I was just saying before. We're all here for a reason. I think everybody's listening to this podcast. it's not an accident. You're hearing things that you say, oh, I didn't know that, or maybe I can do more, or maybe I should be hopeful, because there's never been a better time than today because of contrast. We don't have to now try to explain to people what Marxism and socialism really is. We spend a lot of time doing that. We can now say, look around, guys. Look at your gas price. Look at inflation. Look at the lack of freedom you have, the choice of going to school. Look at the mandates that people put on you and we have to live with. That's not us. That's not the United States of America. So this is probably the best time for us, just like sometimes some of the games we lost, some of the battles we lost on the football field, whatever, we look back and say, I'm so glad that I had to go through that, because now I know what to do to train to get better. And I see that's where we are. We're going to come out of this. I'm going to use an old football analogy from Al Davis. When in the middle of all the craziness, when things are distracting, on our way to play the Super Bowl game, his statement was this: just win, baby. So all the other stuff doesn't matter. Get on the field and just win, baby. And that's what we do best. Once we know we're in a battle, Americans just win. And I think that's what's going to happen.
That's great. So I ask all my guests this question. I just want to ask you the question also. The question is, if loving this is wrong, I don't want to be right. And what is this? The first word that comes to mind, because I'm so much into this one word, is called freedom. Seriously. It is worth living for. It's worth dying for. I think about our parents' generation, those brave men who went to war, not knowing they're going to come back. The idea, and it's a naivety to a degree, because you don't know until you're in battle what the real risk is and what you're about to give up. But the idea, the concept that I can go out and make sure that my kids have a much better future, that this society can be a much more embracive and exciting place to be, that's freedom. We're blessed again. We're in a country that is the center of it. There's no country that began a constitution with those three words: we the people. That says everything about what we can do ourselves individually to make sure that our life can be a good one. So, to say the least, freedom is everything to me, and I love being in this position because we have a chance now to fight for it. And by the way, of all the times to be in Congress, I think this is the best time for those who truly understand our country and want to fight for freedom, because we can slow down this evil of Marxism and socialism, and then once we get back in office in 2022, we can put in place things that we know works. And now we have the wind behind ourselves, because we have Democrats, Independents, and Republicans who are now talking like we never have before and say, we don't like that. We want freedom. And we'll have so much support to moving forward to get things done in the right way. Good.
And I look forward to working with you on that, Ken. I really do.
I love your optimism.
Okay.
I want to thank Burgess Owens for shooting straight with us, and I want to thank you for listening today. I hope this program has been informative, enlightening, and uniting. As Americans struggle with the difficult issues facing our country, we are reminded that good policy is the result of open, thoughtful discussion. For more straight shooting programs, go to my website, shootinstraightpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this show and have ideas about future topics or guests, shoot me an email, ken@shootinstraightpodcast.com. God bless you, and remember to always shoot straight.